Side, that tells you exactly what she thinks.
All right, we're going.
The article started with, I found, well, the one you got, I didn't copy my own. No, the Burleson and Austin family. There you go. When I first seen this, I wanted to know more about the Burlesons in Suffield, Massachusetts Bay Colony, or first Edward. And I never studied him a whole lot, but I found out a lot of things about the family, and it's interesting to research the religion they were under, the way they settled, the way they got ownership of the land, and how they traveled, how they migrated. So I thought maybe I could find some idea of when Edward came over from England. Yeah, it would be nice if the whole town came off of one ship, or was one religion and came in a religious group, but I definitely couldn't find that. One thing in some of the other stuff, if you look on the map, on the bottom left-hand corner, number 14 is Suffield, and it's in the northern part of Connecticut. You see right above Springfield, Massachusetts. Well, the borderline is in 1774, when the town of Suffield was chartered. That was part of Massachusetts Bay Colony. The line was south of there, and it was 70, 80 years later they moved it 40, 50 miles north, and it became Connecticut. But it was settled as part of Massachusetts Bay Colony. And if you go back and look at all the different groups that came to New England during those times, of course, the Pilgrims came over 1620. So we're talking about 20 or 54 years later, Edward shows up. First account we have of him. If you look due east on the coast, is where Plymouth Rock is. So, and that's about 100 miles from the coast to Suffield. That's just about 100 miles distance there. So, and Connecticut River here is pretty much the frontier in 1774. Now, I don't have the rest of the map, but you know, the coastline comes on down here. So, you know, they all settled along the coast, and then they moved inland. So it's not necessarily, these probably moved all west, but there's some down here that, you know, moved north too, and then if you come on this way, you're in New York. But the Suffield Historical Society has got a website, and they posted the first 30 settlers that charter members of the town of Suffield. They're not charter members, but the first 30 members. And I got those listed in my scribbling over here. But what I was trying to do was to plot where they lived before they came to Suffield. And that would tell me something. And I was hoping all maybe came from all one place or something, but they didn't. If you look at the places that got marked on the map, 1 through 7 are all in the Boston area, in north of Boston. But I know in the first 30, the historical societies got very good records from the churches and from the government. From about 1600s, they got very good records and pretty much complete records. So we know the names, we know who they married, mostly through the church records. Of the people born in these first 7 places, I say born, most of them may be born in England, could have been, don't know. The names, well, you got the other thing, this list, if you go to the website, you can click on each one of these and it gives you the generations as far as they got, at least 2 or 3 generations. But like Edward Allen, I don't have a cheat sheet, but yeah, there's the front page of this. This is where they previously lived before they came to Suffield. Some of the times it listed they were born in England. All of them English, all of them Puritans, all the same thing. But like Edward Allen from Innswick, Massachusetts, we know that's where he came from because his history says that's where his children were born prior to 1674. And that's where I got all these locations. And then I plotted it on the map. And but the numbers 8 through 12 are within, on the map, or those are all within 20 miles of Suffield, 25 miles. So, that wasn't, they didn't come from England straight to there. That was second generation or another movement or wherever. But
Now, when you have Edward Burleson here, unknown, all children born in Suffield,
yeah,
unknown meaning we don't know where he
don't
was
know
born.
no report on him before this, before 1774. So we don't know. But his children were born after that in Suffield. All his children. It would have told us something if half of them would have been born there and somewhere else. But all of them were born in Suffield, so we don't have a record. So he was probably young married or a single man when he came to America. And he started his family in America. That's the only thing I can get out of that. It's either that or he was an older man, single man, when he came. But the fact remains he started his family in America, in Massachusetts, and after 1674. So the map don't really tell us a whole lot, except all these people, some of them were listed born in England and then moved to one of these towns and then moved to Suffield. Some of them could have been native born American. And because we're talking about 54 years. So they could have been born here, that's second generation. Could even been the third generation. It's enough time for that, 54 years, is enough time for that. So we don't really know that much more about Edward. My only guess would be, since he settled this far inland, instead of on the coast, that was probably his, he could have been, on a ship, deported here, and then 2 weeks later, he could have been in Suffield. But we don't really know, so that's, the map don't really help us a whole lot, except we know he's in the first 2 generations probably, if not the first to come to America. On the, some of the other things started finding, Suffield's on the Connecticut River, and 2 or 3 years, I don't have a date right now, but 2 or 3 years after the town was settled, it was took over by the Indians, mostly burnt. So our ancestor, Edward, had been fighting, Burleson had been fighting Indians ever since they've been in America. And they were always, always on the frontier, always had trouble with Indians. And not just them, but everybody. But the Burleson family has definitely had a history of the Indians. This is King Philip's Wars, 1675. 3 dozen families had settled by that time, and they were forced to flee to Springfield. And finally, after a year or so, they, you know, the Massachusetts militia finally pushed the Indians out, away from that area.
What do you know about the King Philip's War? Is that a war with the Indians?
Oh, yeah, 100%. There were different tribes, just different tribes that was, it wasn't a combined Indian, it was just, you know, different tribes that had disagreements with the whites coming in, taking their land. And there's a lot of fur trading going on with the Indians. This William, I can't pronounce the name, Tynchon, Pynchon, or he was a fur trader with the Indians, and he was the one that he was a militia officer, and of course King's officer, and he settled the town. He laid out the town as part of, basically as an outpost, and you know, for his area. But the King Philip's War didn't last too long, but there was, you know, a lot of damage done. But our Burleson family was there, and that's about the time the first couple children were being born. So apparently they left and came right back to the same. And Edward died in Suffield, spent his rest of his life there. I think 1699 or 98. But it's the next generation. You get the handout I put out. He had 5 children: John, Fear Not, Return, Mary, Edward. And of those, the oldest child, John, he remained in Suffield, and his children mostly did, but he remained there his entire life. Fear Not remained in the area. He's listed several times on deeds and other things. Return, which is sort of odd with the name Return, he went to sea and didn't return. So he didn't leave a family behind. And Edward, which would be Edward Jr., he was crippled, and there's several references to him and his upkeep. And he's the one that was going to marry
And it was banned.
Elizabeth Jesse. And the way the church is, let me back up a minute. You know, the Pilgrims was one group, one small group of worshipers basically from Church of England. Their thoughts were, they were separatists from the Church of England.
They were separatists.
Yeah.
Now, would we call them as Puritans?
Well, Puritans are a little bit different.
Okay.
Puritans, they were breaking from, they didn't completely break from the Church of England, but they thought the church was going the wrong direction. They were purer than that.
I see.
And they wanted to teach their religion and raise their people their own way. So they were, I don't know how you compare the Pilgrims with the Puritans, but 9/10 of the people early first 100 years settled Massachusetts and New England were Puritans. They wanted the Pilgrim to care what faith they were, but most of them Puritans. And everybody in Suffield were Puritans, including Edward. And you know, that's dissenters from England. And if you go back and look at the time period that Edward shows up, Oliver Cromwell had took over England in 1640s, 50s, 60s. I don't remember what date, I think it was 66 or something. They brought the king back on the throne, and Cromwell died and left the country to his sons, and he wasn't strong enough to hold it, so they brought the king back and restored the king back to the throne. And there was a lot of retaliation from the crown, and a lot of people were leaving the country, a lot of people were getting killed, and that's what sparked the most of the Puritans that felt it's time to go. When Cromwell, when it represent people governing themselves, when the king has his body dug up and hung, it was time to go. It was time to go to another country. And I think that was 1660 or 61 or that time. So shortly after that, Edward Burleson shows up in America. But that's the first three generations. What caught my attention is Edward Jr., the second generation Edward. He was a cripple, and in 1720, he was going to marry Elizabeth Jesse. Her mother and her father-in-law objected to it, and I'm not sure, the record says the bands were forbidden. I'm assuming that's like taking out a wedding band, like taking out a marriage license. Apparently the ceremony was separate from that, but that was forbidden by her mother and her father-in-law, so they were not married. And some years later, 5 years later, Richard Austin and Elizabeth Jesse took out wedding bands. And for whatever reason, Edward Burleson challenged them, forbade them. But for whatever reason, his attempt to stop that didn't work, but Richard Austin and Elizabeth Jesse were married. So I don't know if that was just for spite or what, but it's on record. But I started thinking of the Austin, and started looking up since the Texas connection with the Austin family, Stephen Austin. I just wondered if that was part of the same family, and kept researching that. And there's I don't have the book, but there's I didn't write down the name of the book. But anyhow, the generations of what was it? Stephen. What was the ancestor's name? Anthony Austin. Mm-hmm. Anthony Austin came from England, and I don't know if he stopped between there, but anyhow, he was born in England, and he was the first Austin in Suffield. And there might have been others around, but he was the first one in Suffield. And I think he died in Suffield too. But I started looking at, and I got 2 or 3 generations from Anthony, but I couldn't link back to Stephen Austin. I could go back 2 or 3 real easy, finally is. But Stephen Austin's grandfather, I don't have his, well, his father's name was Moses, and if you know Texas history, Moses Austin got the Spanish grant to build a colony in Texas. And then he died before it was complete, and his son took over. But finally I found a couple of other books and found his first generation goes from Anthony Austin to Richard, his son Richard Austin. Now this Richard Austin, his son is not the same Richard that married Elizabeth Jessie. It's his nephew. It's not the same one. But, and then, how do you pronounce that?
Elias,
Elias. Anyhow, his son, then Moses, then Stephen Austin. And,
So Richard, I'm just looking at that age difference, there's from the second to third, or excuse me, third to fourth, I guess, would be, no, if that, from Richard to Elias. Richard was 66, and then Elias was born 1718, what's that, 34 plus 18 is 52, is that something? I guess it's possible, 52. I'm just looking at the age difference, you know.
yeah,
So it's 52 when he was born.
from 66 to 18, that's 34, 44,
42.
50-some years.
52.
Yeah,
Just the math major.
That's not so much. I know people 40-year-olds having kids. That's not much of a stretch.
I can show you one that was 85 and had one, his last child was 85. He lived, matured that child. He lived to 104.
Nice.
He's a Hudson,
uh,
one of the Hudsons in Stanley County.
mm,
His wife at that time was 18.
Yeah. You just sound like, when you look at this, when I look at those, you're always used to those young ages when their kids are born at this time, so. So, sorry, didn't mean to throw you off.
The, in the Austin line, you know, Anthony Austin's remained in Suffield. And his son, Richard, he also remained in Suffield, in that area. Eliza, everybody's name is, he left, and he went to, I believe, down in Virginia before he died. And Moses, time Moses came along, he died in Arkansas. So there was, the third and fourth generation moved out of the area, out of New England area, was the first ones. But,
and obviously Stephen moved a long way, he ended up in Texas.
Where
Yeah.
did Moses start from? Where was he when he was born?
Hmm.
When Moses was born, where was he?
Suffield.
I,
No,
No,
because
not
Elias
Moses.
already moved out by that point. Was he in Virginia?
I got it. I think he was in Virginia. I'm pretty sure he was born in Virginia. And if you go look it up, there's a couple of Moses. Moses had an uncle
Mhm.
that was real big in the Stephen Austin colony. But he was an uncle to this Moses. The third generation, Elias, what his name is, he started out, or at one time, he was the owner, part owner, or operator of the Fort Caswell lead mines in Fort Caswell, Virginia, in Shenandoah Valley. And that's how he got interested in minerals, lead and stuff, and that's how Moses, from him, Moses was in Arkansas looking for minerals and gold or whatever, that type of stuff. And then he became interested and got caught up in the land deal. But I thought that was pretty interesting that 5 and 6 generations later, well, I guess we got to prove that Edward is kin to Edward, the General Edward Burroughs. And that's what is, you know, that's not, there's no will or anything says that's true. The Edward Burroughs from Suffield, he's real, he's on record, and his children are on record. There's no doubt about that in New England records, in land records, Bible record and everything else. His son John, was the same way. He lived, I'm pretty sure his entire life in Suffield. And if you look on this sheet, second generation, the oldest child, John, he had Sarah, John, Jonathan, Mercy, Joseph, Abigail, Mary, Elizabeth, and Rachel. The John Burleson, the second generation, or he's really the third generation. He is known and recorded, his wife's recorded, and his kids are recorded in Suffield, in that area. If you look on the right page over there, all his children were born there and raised there. So, we know we don't descend from him. Jonathan, only record in Suffield there is that he was born 11th June 1704. That's church records. Don't have any more records of him in Suffield. Don't have any records at all in North. Joseph, born 1708. I don't have complete information here, but I'm pretty sure that he lived out his life in Suffield too. That he died young. I don't know if he had a family, but I'm pretty sure he lived his life in Suffield. And the rest of them were girls. So all the New England Burlesons are known, but Jonathan. And we got a record. He was real. He lived, and he definitely born in 1704. The next record we have of a Jonathan Burleson is Louisburg, Virginia.
Oh my gosh.
Now, in 1748,
So 40
Uh,
years.
that would have made him 44-year-old. But we have good records of, plenty of records of him in Louisburg County and Bedford County, same place, the county changed names. But with the John in there. But the thing about it, 1748, all these other Burlesons that existed in the United States, all of them were documented somewhere else. By the third generation, some of them were in Connecticut, some of them in Vermont. The later generations went on to New York. In 1748, all of them are documented except Jonathan. And they're all in New England. Jonathan's in Virginia. Why wouldn't that be our Jonathan? It can't be nobody else. It can't be nobody else. So, I don't see any stretch. I don't see that you need to stretch anything to prove that that's the same Jonathan. When you got 50 Burlesons alive, 49 of them accounted for, and then one shows up 200 miles away, what's the stretch for saying, he just got a 44-year break. We don't know where he was at 44 years. But we do know where he was at. I'm saying that, Jonathan was the third generation, and his son Aaron and John that was with him in Louisburg are his sons. And of course we know Aaron's son Joseph was interviewed in 1819, and he says his father was born in New Jersey, which makes sense. If you put your dot in Louisburg, Virginia, and a dot up in Suffield, Connecticut, on that line, right there, you're right there in the New Jersey area. So I just don't, it's not stretching anything for me to know that that's the right Jonathan. That's the Jonathan Louisburg, Virginia right there. And if you go from his son, Aaron, which is listed with him Aaron and John enlisted with him in Leelandsburg, Virginia. And you put him next, fourth generation, and Captain James, which is his son, and then General Edward, which is his son. So that's 6 generations of Burlesons, and 5 generations of Austins. General Edward and Stephen Austin meet up in Texas, and we know their history and their importance to Texas, but they all go back to the same town, Suffield, Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1674, which is, and they probably never met in between. Now they, none of them did probably not, because apparently Jonathan, the grandson, apparently he left after 1724. So he's 20-year-old and 24. Between there and 48, he left Suffield and started his travel. That's not about a 20-year travel time. And you go from Connecticut to New Jersey down to Virginia. But when Stephen Austin started his colony, if you read the history books, I said those two probably had more to do with geography and history of Texas than anybody else. Stephen Austin definitely started his father of Texas, no doubt about that. When they were having troubles, to avoid troubles with the Mexican government, Stephen Austin was going to Mexico City to negotiate land grants and stuff. There wasn't any fighting going on yet, but tempers are getting there. So he turned over, there wasn't no state of Texas or town or whatever, but Stephen Austin turned over the leadership of the country of Texas to Edward Burleson, and he went to Mexico. And Austin remained in Mexico for 2 years. They put him in prison instead of sending him back. And during that time, Edward started off, with it. And then by that time, there were Indian troubles and Mexican troubles, and then, the war started eventually. There were so many people coming in, and they wanted independence. And basically, the people coming in from the United States, first you had to swear oath to the Mexican government. You had to convert to Catholicism. And a lot of them didn't want to do that. They come in, they just say, we're here, we're taking the land, and we get more and more every day, and we're going to keep it. We're going to set up our own government. But that was the faith that Stephen Austin had in Edward Burleson. But I thought that was pretty interesting. That's about all I found. I was hoping, by the map, I was hoping to give us a clue about where this Edward came from. Which it don't really tell anything other than he might have been the first generation there, he might have been the second generation. But there was lots of people from 1640, 1680, there's hundreds and hundreds of people coming in, hundreds of Puritans coming in over to Massachusetts Bay Colony and surrounding areas. A lot of them with different groups, churches, religious groups will break off and move out and start a colony of their own, or a town of their own and stuff. There's several of them, but where we find Edward is just Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is under by the Puritans, and remain that way. They didn't split off and go to other regions. Rhode Island was started by a different reason. One of the guys, Remington,
Thomas Remington.
yeah. I forgot what year he was born, but he was born in England in Rowley.
1631.
There's a small community there in Rowley, England, and the preacher from that church district, they kicked him out of the Church of England because he was preaching Puritan faith, basically. And they kicked him out, and he gathered up 40 families, I think, or 20 or 40 families, and they all came over together in one ship to one road up there above, just north of Boston, and formed a town there of their own. Now, it would have been nice to find our Edward in a group like that. We'd know where we'd know when he came over and where he came from. But that's the only one, Remington's the only one of this group that I could pinpoint down, to one area. So, go back to Edward, we just don't know. But it's saying a lot that our ancestors probably didn't come over to Mayflower, 1620, but shortly after that they were there.
And this information we were fed years ago that our Burlesons came through the port of Baltimore, and that was just all
Well,
false information.
that, the Rufus theory story, not theory, but story, he says, came over in 1716. That this Edward came over in 1716. He'd been dead for 20 years and had 3 or 4 generations. He had great-grandchildren before. And it's not, these are documented in church records, and there's no doubt about this. What Rufus had in his brief history of the Burleson family, I don't,
Well, has
I have no idea where
that
it came from.
information begun to crumble?
Oh, everybody knows that's incorrect. But if you go to the internet, that's all you see. And from that, of course, his brother, and he was even a knight. Puritans were not knights. They were not with the Church of England, a knight under the king. They were Puritans. They left England to get away from the King of England. They were not knights. Edward was a flax dresser. The record says he was a flax dresser, just a poor farmer, village farmer. He had maybe 8 or 10 acres of land and raised flax and dressed them down and whatever he did with them. But the other part of the story is that Aaron Burleson came over 10 years later in 1726 looking for his brother. There's never been the first document of an Aaron Burleson.
Oh, you mean that's what he said?
That's what Rufus wrote in
Oh, I
the
see.
brief history
I
of
see.
the Burleson family in 1885. But that Aaron Burleson he's talking about has never been documented anywhere. And you can find lots about him, his wife's name, where he was born, children's name, all that. But there's never been a first document that's got his name on it. Nowhere, no hint, except in the brief history of the Burleson family. But that's about all I know.
Any other questions?
I was looking over some other stuff today, and some of the church records, and town records, and I think it was one of the second generation, one of those kids, the town was given money for different things, and the town allowed whatever, pounds or whatever, to one of the Burlesons for nursing, or the wife of John Burleson, whoever it was, the wife was allowed 5 pounds or something for nursing Bush's wife. So maybe I'll start looking at that closer and see which Bush that was. Bush is definitely from that area.
Yeah.
That's where they landed. But I seen that one time, I had to look any further. So we might have another connection with famous.
Oh, the Bushes then ended up in Texas,
Mhm.
those Bushes.